All right, Steve. So let's go back to the beginning. It all started for you in 1980 with Ladbrokes.
That's
So
right.
tell us
Yeah.
about how you got into the game.
There was an advert. I left school, did 3.5 years in the supermarket, and then saw an advert. Ladbrokes wanted training manager in Wantage, where I lived. Wow, that was like, well, we'll be applying for that. Anyway, got the job, started my training, ended up running the shop from the sort of July onwards of 1980. Stayed there for a couple of years, went out on relief to different shops, ran the shop at Headington for a while, which was a very, very busy shop. Ended up back in Abingdon in sort of about 84, and then 1985, Steve Fisher was buying out the little independent bookmaker that was in Abingdon. There was 2 Ladbrokes shops and an independent. One of the people that worked for the independent used to work for Ladbrokes, and she's come round and said, come and work for Steve Fisher. I knew a guy called Ray who was like Steve Fisher's right-hand man. He ran the shop in Wantage, and we just went round for a little chat, basically. And I remember saying to him, I think it'd be very interesting. There's going to be a kind of a price war, or I don't think Ladbrokes would like it, because I think Steve was always ahead of the game. Some of the things.
This is Stan James.
This is Steve Fisher from. And I've said to him, I think I'd rather come and going to be a bit of a war going. Rather come and fight for you than stay with Ladbrokes.
Yeah.
So I've jumped ship basically.
And so you introduced Bog, best odds guarantee, which ruined betting.
Well, hang on. Whoa. I had heard that, I believe it was Corals did it for the whole of a Cheltenham festival meeting. Got themselves in a right pickle. The thing with best odds guaranteed, if you've got multiple bets and as a bookmaker, you don't really know your true liabilities, because the last one is a 6-to-1 shot, but in all reality it could start at 10. You didn't know your liabilities. Now I'm in the shop in Abingdon, and we used to have, if you remember the old board markers and there was this marketing kit, and you'd have a little thing, snooker, you'd have football, and you'd do a board display. Ladbrokes were always keen on, you'd do a board display with an example bet. And there was a thing, and it said race of the day. I thought, I could do something with that. And I just thought, this will go down well. We'll do one race every day where we would have guaranteed odds. So you came in, we would say to them, we'll put the price on this for you. If the SP is bigger, we'll pay you SP. And they'd look at you as if, oh, bloody hell, you're going crazy. And I think it was a race at Taunton, and it was a 9-to-4 shot in the morning. It won at 130. And it was on a few multiple bets, and it was a few singles. So when it came in, it paid, you give me too much here, Steve. No, we're going to pay you SP. I took 9-to-4. No, it won at 130, 43, 33. Christ, either. People would come in, well, what's the race of the day? What's the race of the day? Word would get around, and word got around in the town. You'd have people coming in. Now, I knew a lot of customers, but they would go to Ladbrokes because it was nearer for them for parking, or all of a sudden, they'd come in and they wouldn't know what race it was. I would decide one race. We'd try and get it earlier on in the afternoon if we could, so that it was all done and dusted and there wouldn't be too much money running on. But we had this one race, which we called Race of the Day, all down to this little green and yellow marketing board display. And that took off then. And when we got on to selling as a company called IBS, which was Stan James, selling the screen service to independent bookmakers, it was a massive selling point.
Okay, tell us a bit about Steve Fisher, the founder of Stan James.
Yeah, Steve, well, he started one shop up on the Downs at Compton. Would have been, I suppose, mid-70s. He was from Nottingham, went agricultural college. I'd only seen him a few times in my Ladbrokes days. I went to work for him in October '85. I did a couple of years over at Marlborough He took 2 guys on from Ladbrokes. Well, one guy went and ran the Abingdon shop. Would I go to Marlborough? I didn't know where it was. 25 miles. You know, bunged me a few quid petrol money, and it was good. But I could tell that he was ahead of the game. He would say to me, football coupons, they shouldn't be waiting for them to turn up. You should have a printer, a computer in your shop and print it out like they do now. Well, that was, I mean, we're talking 30 years ago. He was always ahead of the game. I got on well with him. I'd say to him, look, I think we should try this. He would just say, try it, do it. I kind of had a free roll, which was different to being in a Ladbrokes shop environment. You just felt there's always people watching you. Have you done this? You will do this. And it was a kind of I could express myself more.
And when you joined him, he had 5 shops.
5 shops.
How many did he have when you left him?
Well, he bought a load of other shops all over the place, and a massive telephone business. Shop-wise, 60 odd probably. But obviously the internet's come along. The whole business absolutely grew and grew and grew. We moved from above a shop in Didcot, Wantage Road in Didcot, where there was 6 phone lines. You couldn't imagine. Then we moved to a premises in Milton Park, which seemed massive at the time, but we outgrew that. Then we had a purpose-built office down on Grove Technology Park, sort of 5 minutes from me. And at its height, I think we had about 105 people there, 110 people there.
Okay, so in 1990, you were responsible for putting everything on the screens. All of a sudden, the screens are all up there.
Yeah. We've
There are
got
12 shops at this point, and
That's
you were
correct.
putting everything on there.
Yeah.
So that must have been quite a labour-intensive.
It was.
long job.
You had 15 pages of information that need to be on display. You'd probably have half a dozen early prices. Well, then you could phone a thing called the Jackson and Lowe Morning Price Indicator. You'd phone, there's no 898 number, everybody would phone it. Bookmakers would phone it. That was the tissue of the day, basically. Everybody would phone it. If they say that they didn't use it, then they were telling porkies. I would get those. I would add a little bit to some of the prices. I'd look in the Sporting Life. If it was 7 and if it was 9 in the Life, I'd go a little bit bigger. I'd try and be as competitive as I could, but those were the early prices on the horses. We had to put the football prices up, but we used them from the coupon. And then there was any other stuff that was suggested by SIS for that day. It was based around what hills were going to be betting on. So you'd have some snooker matches, you'd have some tennis matches, and I had to sort of find a way, beg, steal or borrow, and come up with some prices to put on these screens. Now we had 12 shops as Stan James. We had other independent bookmakers were on board from more or less day one. Paul Gold of Pickwick Racing, Jamie Bruce, Don Bruce at Ruislip, Taylor's Racing in Reading, Regency Racing in the Midlands came in. There was all, it grew and grew, and eventually there was, at its height, there was well over 1,000 shops, independent shops, taking these prices.
And you were responsible for all the odds as well?
Yeah, it was down to me. I had to put the display up. That was down to me. There also then, the Corals had a tricast. I was checking some results or putting papers up in the shop or doing something, looking at the dog results, and it said Corals tricast. I thought, what was that? So it wasn't very easy to work out. They just basically took the SPs of the 3 dogs. 4, if it was 3 4 to 1 shot, 4 times 4, 16 times 4, 64. 64 quid. Checked it for a few other races. So I spoke to Steve Fisher. I think we should be offering tricast. Look, this is what Corals are doing. Oh God, you know, do you think people would do tricast? Yeah, of course they would. Dog racing then, in betting shops, was far more popular than it is now.
The 2 meetings on a Saturday morning, I remember them.
Oh, unbelievable scenes. I remember being in, I actually spent my 16th birthday in a betting shop.
Don't try this now, kids.
No, don't. No, you mustn't, please. Yeah, thanks for that, Simon. But 16th birthday, it was Hackney Dogs, and there was a dog called West Ham. and I had £2 on this dog at 1 at 4 to 1. Now that was a fortune as a 16-year-old, when you could buy a pair of baggy jeans and some screw-in stud football boots for sort of £3 a go. That was a fortune. But yeah, the greyhound side of things was still popular in the shops. So we started introducing the tricast. So we'd use the Corals formula and add 3.5% on. So Corals would pay £64, we'd be 64 plus the 3.5%. But I had to send that over, to calculate it and send it over after each race to update on the screen. The actual method was flawed, because if you had a 12 to 1 shot finish third, the dog isn't 12 to 1, it's 12 to 1 to win the race, it's not 12 to 1 to come third. So it took a bit of recalculation.
Did you have some clever punters
Yeah,
tuck
there
you
were.
up?
Well, we just about got away with it. There was a series of shops, or a group of shops. Lewis Cowan had some shops based in and around Reading, and he had one just opposite Reading Station, across the road. Now the guy that ran that lived half a mile from me, a guy called John Kearsley. Now he moved on to Arthur Prince and then Corals. The last I heard of him, he was doing a little bit part-time on the race course, but I've not seen or spoken to him for years. He would get these two guys, they'd turn up, they'd come down on the train from London, and they would do tricast, field, trap 4, 20 to 1 shot. Now, you wouldn't normally have 20 to 1 shots in graded races, but every now and again you'd have some opens. There'd be a competition on at Hackney. You'd have some open races and you'd have some big price dogs that theoretically couldn't win the race, but they weren't 12 to 1, 20 to 1 to come third. So it took a little bit of thinking about. Now, where John lived and I lived, in between us was a guy called Malcolm Boyle, which you may have heard of, PlaySpot book, all sorts of things. He was a former
One of my first interviewees.
Well, there we go. Well, he lived in between John and myself. We would meet up on a couple of times on the morning, and I'd drive him down. We'd go down the pub. Malcolm and John would have a couple of pints. I wasn't too bothered, I was driving. And we'd try and put the world to rights. And one of the things came up, John was about this tricast. Oh no, he said it wouldn't be 12 to 1 to come third, this and that. Now, both of us, independently, have designed a chart that where 12 to 1 would be sort of 9 to 2 to come third, 20 to 1 would be 7 or 8, and we scaled it down, and then very soon we had to revise the way we did it. So we used the bags forecast, which was coming to computer straight forecast, and then multiplied it by this kind of new factor. But we were fortunate in as much as we didn't get caught, and none of the shops got caught with a big payout. That would have been my fault.
So you were onto hiding to nothing on the odd occasion.
Oh
maybe,
yeah,
Rick.
definitely. My neck was, without realising it, my neck was on the line quite a few times. Luckily, we're still intact. Yeah.